This guy was basically a total cripple who couldn't even take care of himself. Yet, the very second he stepped into the alternate world, he instantly shattered a return record that had been sealed for a century. All because I possess the ability to create infinite clones. My first clone dove deep into forbidden magic, determined to become the undying demon god who'd shake the entire continent. My second clone devoted himself to the chief god's order, using pure, absolute faith to knock on the gates of the divine, ascending to become a glorious holy knight. My third clone willingly joined forces with the vampire clan. Relying on his pure, untainted bloodline power, he easily claimed the throne as the leader of the newborn vampires. My fourth clone carried the weight of the world, relentlessly pursuing justice. Using his own flesh and blood to protect the masses, he rose up to become the continent's most revered hero. And my fifth clone? He relied on his extraordinary business mind, navigating the commercial circles of various nations, calculating every single step, until he finally reached the very top, joining the ranks of the continent's most prestigious tycoons. You see, this is a world where superpowers awaken. Centuries ago, human bodies began to mutate, developing all sorts of bizarre abilities. Right after, they'd be grabbed by some mysterious force and forcibly teleported into an alternate world. Only by completing insanely difficult missions there could they ever hope to return to the Blue Star. But honestly, the number of people who actually made it back to the Blue Star alive was practically zero. Driven mad by despair, the awakened ones started causing horrific riots right before their forced teleportations. During one of those riots, I watched helplessly as my family was taken from me and I was left permanently paralyzed for the rest of my life. Completely crushed, I chose to live out my days in total isolation. Right now, staring at my completely numb legs, I cursed God for being so damn unfair. But just as my mind was spiraling, a cold, robotic voice suddenly echoed in my ears. Host detected. The Akasha system is now connecting, awakening the one and only hidden ability, Avatar. Host will be forcibly teleported to the alternate world in exactly 2.5 hours. I just stared blankly at the pop-up window floating in front of me. If the survival rate for a normal person going to the alternate world was only 5%, then for a crippled loser like me who couldn't even walk, I probably wouldn't even survive the very first day. You see, time in the alternate world moves 10 times faster than on the Blue Star. Before this, the absolute fastest record for an awakened returning home was 1 full year, which meant I would have to survive in that hellish alternate world for at least 10 years. Right then, all I could do was silently pray that this avatar thing was some massively overpowered lifesaver skill. But then, out of nowhere, a figure that looked exactly like me materialized right before my eyes. I guessed this had to be the effect of the avatar skill because right at that moment, I could actually see through the other body's eyes. Instantly, a completely insane idea popped into my head. I squeezed my eyes shut and ordered my clone to walk straight into the teleportation magic circle, staring at the system window that read teleportation complete. I was gasping for air, panting heavily, but almost immediately, I felt something super creepy. I distinctly sent my avatar to complete the teleportation mission in my place. But right now I could clearly feel that my real body had also arrived in the alternate world. It felt exactly like my soul was piloting 2 separate bodies at the exact same time. Then, with a loud ding, the system notified me, due to independently returning to the Blue Star without using the Karma Shop, you have unlocked the privilege ability, Interdimensional Teleportation Array. You may use this array to travel to any previously visited location, usable only 1 time per day. Simultaneously, you have successfully set a new record for returning to the Blue Star, rewarding host with 1,910,213 karma points. At that moment, my face was frozen in utter disbelief. If I guessed correctly right after I recalled my clone back to my main body, it triggered a massive system glitch. The system actually thought I had already survived and returned to the Blue Star. And because of that, I shattered the long-standing speedrun record. The karma points the system just rewarded me with are insanely valuable to any awakened person. They're usually handed out in strict amounts based on an awakened's performance in the alternate world. Only by hoarding enough karma points can you ever buy the item from the shop to return to the Blue Star. Awakened ones can also use them to boost their skill effects. And me? I was sitting on nearly 2 million karma points right off the bat. This was roughly equal to 2 whole years of resources hoarded by a top-tier awakener. With a swipe of my hand, I pulled up the recovery enhancement status window. Instantly, a warm, soothing energy surged straight into my leg bones. Within moments, I could feel that my legs had completely regained their feeling. Next, I shifted my focus to the unique skill enhancement window. Ding! My avatar just awakened the ability to think entirely on its own. Which meant, from now on, even without me actively controlling it, the avatar could move around in the other world all by itself. On top of that, it would filter out any nasty physical sensations and intense emotional shocks for me. That meant whether it was the intense vertigo from crossing dimensions, or the avatar actually getting injured, I wouldn't feel a damn thing. It was exactly like playing a virtual reality game, controlling an in-game character. Plus, the number of avatars I could split into would increase as the skill leveled up. I decided to name my very first avatar, Hans. Since his unique trait was magic affinity, I figured he should be the one to head to the alternate world first and clear the adventure quests for me. As for the second avatar, I named him Heinz. His unique trait was toughness, so he would stay right here on Blue Star to focus purely on physical training. About 2.5 minutes later, I shifted my point of view over to Hans. The drop-off point in the alternate world was right near a dense, overgrown forest. but I barely took a few steps before running headfirst into a vicious beast. I quickly drew my dagger, bracing hard against the monstrous bear as it lunged at me. Just as I suspected, my real body back home didn't feel a single drop of fear or panic. I gripped my dagger tight and channeled my magic directly into the bear's body. Squelch! The blade pierced right through the beast's flesh. After catching my breath, I noticed a small path just up ahead, leading to a small village. The village chief, Thomas, looked like a genuinely sweet old man. He greeted me with a warm smile, welcomed me in as a guest, and generously offered to let me stay the night. Once I felt Hans's body drift off into a deep sleep, I pulled my consciousness back to my own body. But only a moment later, a sickening wave of dread washed over me. Right on cue, a flashing red system warning popped up. Warning, Avatar Hans has died. Avatar traits and all accumulated data will now be reset. Since Hans died right there in the village, I bet my life that the village chief, Thomas, was the one pulling the strings. If I had to guess, that bastard spiked my dinner. But before I could even process what had happened, the system pinged me again, telling me the connection to Hans had been restored. And wait, his race had changed to undead. He even gained a new special skill, Corrupted Heart. I immediately synced back into Hans's vision. Now, standing right in front of me, was a massive horde of skeletal creatures. Based on their ragged clothes, they looked more like the local villagers than any kind of awakeners. Which meant only one thing, that Psycho Village Chief had actually turned his entire village into the undead. Suddenly, a foreign energy grabbed hold of my body, trying to force me to move. With my current physical stats, I could easily brush it off. But I didn't want to alert the enemy. It was better to just play along and follow their orders for now. But honestly, there was something weirdly familiar about this energy. Feeling it closely, it felt exactly like the energy I used to control Hans in the first place. If this was Hans's magic affinity trait kicking in, I might actually be able to use it to hijack the other undead skeletons. Fast forward about 7 days. And thanks to that magic affinity, I had already managed to successfully mind control one of the undead skeletons. Oh, and during that time, I figured out something incredibly interesting on top of controlling the undead. I can also control a few smaller guys now, which gives me much better options for my nighttime scouting. Through my shared vision, I noticed that every single night, Village Chief Thomas's companions would head to an abandoned wooden cabin. There's a faint, eerie aura seeping out from inside. Even with the mind hub filtering out my emotions, my real body still felt a primal, instinctive surge of fear. Plus, there was a lingering trace of that same rotting stench, the exact same one coming from me. So my guess is that Thomas and his crew are most likely some downright wicked dark mages. Since there are fellow skeletons inside that cabin, it strongly suggests that they're carrying out some sort of ancient, twisted ritual. But just as I turned around, getting ready to track down where Thomas went, a massive surge of energy silently blasted right through my body. That's when Thomas slowly started walking toward me. Thank God he didn't notice the lingering traces of my presence. By the time the next day rolled around, a young man showed up in the village. He claimed that his older brother went missing around here, so he requested a meeting with Village Chief Thomas to ask around for some clues. The moment Village Chief Thomas heard that, his eyes went wide with shock. He realized that the young man standing right in front of him looked exactly the same as that awakened he ran into a few nights ago. And that young man? Well, that was none other than my second avatar, Heinz. I introduced myself, saying I was Hans's twin brother. My telepathic link kept telling me that Hans had to be somewhere really close by. Then, I shifted my vision right back over to Hans. Right at that moment, back in that abandoned wooden cabin, a bunch of undead were gathered in a massive circle. And sitting right dead in the middle was a glowing, dark purple crystal. I knew it. Thomas really was using dark magic to drain the soul energy straight out of those skeleton villagers. The system prompted me that this crystal was called the Fragment of the Undead King. Just standing in front of that crystal, I could feel this incredibly overwhelming, crushing pressure. Just who the hell is this Undead King? If a mere fragment can unleash this kind of power. While no one was looking, I turned to the undead skeletons right in front of me and unleashed my magic affinity trait. In a split second, a flood of dark, negative emotions came rushing straight into my mind. The very next moment, my head felt like it was completely stuffed to the bursting point. Then, with a sudden ding, a system window popped right up in my face. Conditions met for individual growth. Elite Undead, Hans, has evolved into an Immortal Mage, a Necromancer. Special condition triggered. The dark magic hidden within the fragment has fused with the individual. Fragment of the Undead King progress. 1/3 complete. Acquired special skill. Unholy Wisdom. That had to be the effect of my magic affinity. It forcefully fused the Undead King's fragment right into Hans's body, triggering the evolution. Thanks to my magic affinity, it didn't take long for me to completely hijack command of the entire skeleton army. That completely freaked the guard out. He suddenly realized that the skeletons right in front of him had completely broken free from his control. And that was a very, very bad feeling for him. Seconds later, the heavy door sealed with a dark magic barrier was forcefully smashed open by my newly commanded skeleton army. All thanks to my brand new skill, Unholy Wisdom. I just needed to take one look to completely figure out any dark attribute magic. Just then, Village Chief Thomas, radiating a bone-chilling aura, came storming right toward me. He furiously demanded to know where the hell I had taken the fragment of the Undead King. He couldn't sense even a single trace of the fragment's aura anymore. Hearing that, I just casually smirked and summoned a glowing phantom image right over my heart. That pissed Thomas off beyond belief. He started screaming that he absolutely wouldn't let me get away with taking the Undead King's fragment and fusing it into such a filthy, low-class body. And with that, Thomas fiercely swung his magic wand. In an instant, the air filled with a mysterious energy. It felt like he was manipulating all the dark magic around us. This was his skill finger of death. With a massive rumble from deep underground, a gigantic spike erupted from the earth. But I didn't even bother dodging, just conjured an energy shield, and effortlessly absorbed the entire blow. Thomas stared at me, absolutely dumbfounded. He never expected that I'd actually mastered dark magic. With a massive sweep of his hand, the souls of every dark mage in the village swarmed toward him, as dozens of souls fused together. They slowly twisted into a pitch-black crown. He started muttering under his breath, clearly preparing to unleash some devastating spell. But I was out of patience. I wasn't going to waste any more time on him. Boom! A terrifying force slammed right into Thomas, sending him flying through the air. His heart dropped, gripped by a kind of absolute terror he had never felt before. He stammered, desperately trying to spit out a word, but his breath quickly faded into nothing. Meanwhile, in a mysterious ancient castle, the Holy Maiden, Lestar, caught a glimpse of the near future. An omen of the Undead King's resurrection had appeared in the western continent. Back with me. After taking care of Thomas, I stepped outside the village. Nearly all the hundreds of undead warriors had been wiped out in the fight. However, ever since this body of Hans evolved into a necromancer, I no longer needed living targets. Even dead bodies could be controlled at will. I quickly tracked down Thomas's corpse. During the battle just now, he had drained the souls of all the other dark mages. So, if I wanted to squeeze any intel out of him about the Undead King, I'd have to interrogate his soul. But to my absolute shock, there wasn't a single trace of a soul left inside Thomas's body. Judging from the marks left behind, someone had forcefully ripped it out using a magic circle, which meant there had to be a much more powerful organization pulling the strings behind him. After wrapping up that mess, I returned to my real body, ready to boost my stats. Since Hans had already evolved into a higher life form, a necromancer, my true body would actually feel an instinctive wave of terror whenever I faced him. Ding! Awakened. William's mental stats have surpassed the baseline. Skill acquired, Tranquil Mind. This keeps your heart perfectly calm, unaffected by any outside distractions, and blocks out mental attacks. Once I finished upgrading my skills, a weird feeling washed over me. It felt like I was always getting the exact skill I desperately needed at that moment. Anyway, I headed outside to grab some dinner. Just to be safe, I kept using dark magic to hide Hans inside my shadow. But looking around, maybe I was just being paranoid. The blue planet seemed pretty peaceful right now. Before I could even finish that thought, boom, a massive explosion rocked the street behind me. I whipped my head toward the sound, only to see the jewelry store across the street being robbed. I could even spot beastmen among them. If I had to guess, these guys were part of the infamous villains, a nasty title for people who used their awakened powers to commit crimes. Sure, there were righteous awakened who stepped up to protect ordinary citizens. But if they were actually useful, my family wouldn't have been brutally murdered by scum like them. Just then, the thugs who robbed the store brushed right past me. I just kept telling myself the Guardians will track them down. Let them handle it. After years of living in hiding, I had absolutely zero confidence left in myself. Meanwhile, the thugs who robbed the store arrived at an abandoned warehouse. As long as they stepped through the portal they had set up earlier, they'd completely lose the Guardians. But when they finally got there, all they found was their lookout, knocked out cold on the floor. Seeing this, the Beastman quickly crouched down to ask his buddy what the hell just happened. Right then, a skeleton slowly stepped out from the shadows. I finally figured it out. Right now, I'm not just me anymore. There's also Hans and Heinz. Meanwhile, over at the National Guardian Association Center, they deployed a squad to track down the thugs who caused this whole mess. Fast forward about 2.5 minutes. When they arrived at the scene, there was no sign of the massive standoff they had expected. All they saw were the thugs, knocked out cold on the ground. It looked like someone else had already taken out the trash. Back on my end, I was just walking home. Honestly, it feels pretty damn good to stretch my bones every once in a while. Once I got home, I took control of my second body, Heinz, and walked right up to a massive castle. It was supposed to be this bustling town, at least. That's what I heard from that old geezer, Thomas. But honestly, the place wasn't anywhere near as lively as he made it out to be. Actually, it was dead quiet. I couldn't even spot a single guard checking on outsiders. But then, as I was walking past a narrow alleyway, I spotted this bald dude. He was picking on a little girl. Looked like he was shaking her down for cash. But hey, that's none of my business. It really doesn't have anything to do with me. So, I just waited for them to leave, then walked up to the kid to ask a few questions. I want to hire you as my guide. I'll pay you 2 silver coins for the trouble. Soon after, with Ira leading the way, we arrived at the very best inn in town. I told her she could be my daily city guide, and that she'd get 2 silver coins a day for it. That way, she wouldn't have to worry about getting shaken down for protection money anymore. Anyway, the next day rolled around pretty quickly. Chatting with Ira, I managed to learn a bit about the history of this city. The place was called Azantu. It's just a small city tucked away in the Belia Kingdom, over on the western side of the continent. But there was one thing that really bugged me. All over the city, there were these weird symbols painted everywhere. And honestly, they didn't look like they were drawn with normal paint. They looked a hell of a lot more like fresh blood. When I asked Ira about it, she told me It was actually the logo of the Barak gang, the guys running the streets. Pretty soon after that, I noticed Ira had this crazy unique ability. She could smell absolutely everything around her. Like, she casually pointed out that I had chicken blood soup for breakfast, just because she could smell the faint scent of chicken blood on me. But right as we were stepping out of the alleyway, a blood-soaked figure stumbled around in the shadows, barely able to stand. Just like that, 2.5 days went by. I was waiting at our usual spot for a really long time. But Ira never showed up. Honestly, it was starting to freak me out a bit. She was almost always there before me. Just as I was wondering what was going on, 2 figures slowly started walking my way. I recognized them immediately. It was that bald guy who was shaking Ira down the other day. Knowing the drill, I handed over a hefty handful of silver coins. The second they got their protection money, they looked pretty damn pleased and turned to leave. But as they were walking away, I caught them muttering something under their breath. Something about snatching a little girl yesterday. And looking closer, the tattoos on their necks were the exact same creepy symbols I saw painted all over the streets. Thinking about it, I stepped right up and yelled at them to stop. But a second later, all the fight just inexplicably drained out of me. I just still couldn't completely conquer my own fears. But right at that moment, I heard Ira's voice coming from right behind me. I spun around, totally realizing I had gotten the whole thing mixed up. But before I could even explain, the bald guy was already clenching his fists, ready to beat me to a pulp. So I didn't even think twice. I just dumped every last silver coin I had on me straight into his hands. Because right then, Ira looked absolutely devastated. I tried to calm her down, asking her to just tell me what the hell was wrong. Fighting back tears, she choked out that her little brother had suddenly gone missing. And the second she said that, it hit me. If my ears weren't playing tricks on me earlier, that bald bastard explicitly mentioned they snatched a little girl. So maybe she isn't the only one. There could be other kids who got taken away. Hearing this, Isla's legs just gave out, like all her strength vanished in an instant. If the Belial Syndicate really was the one who took her little brother, then all hope is completely lost. Because they don't want protection money, they want their blood. I was a bit confused. Why would they need blood? That's when AILA told me the dark truth about this city's origins. This place, Xantu, is actually just a feeding ground for vampires. Every single gang here, including the Belial Syndicate, serves the vampires. None of the citizens here even have the right to leave. They were born to be livestock for the vampires. That explains why I didn't see any guards at the city gates. They actually want more outsiders to wander in and become fresh meat. Taking it all in, I gently cupped Isla's face. If everything you're telling me is true, then we have to hurry up and save your brother. Hearing this, a deep wave of worry washed over her face. People have tried to stand up and fight these gangs before, she said, but in the end they all just became vampire food. I told her not to worry about any of that, because right now, I had just triggered a hidden quest. Rescue the tragic maiden, with AILA leading the way. I arrived at the bald guy's hideout. Just then, some guy ran right up to me, looking super excited. He had this arrogant smirk on his face, clearly thinking I was just some clueless idiot from out of town, who would willingly hand over a fat stack of cash for protection. He completely missed the dark, murderous look on my face, and just kept rambling on. He figured that if I made it inside, I must have paid off the bald guard outside with a ton of silver coins. So, he expected me to show him the same generosity. I completely ignored his nonsense and got straight to the point. Where did you take the kids? Hearing that, the guy looked pissed. It was probably the first time anyone had ever dared to talk down to him like that. The very next second, my hand shot out and clamped tightly around his throat. I'm going to give you one last chance, I growled. Tell me where you're keeping the kids. Otherwise I'll show you that generosity you wanted. I'll make sure you end up exactly like your bald buddy outside. Before coming here, I had already figured one thing out. With my super strength and hyper regeneration skills, I had absolutely nothing to fear from these thugs. Sure enough, the daggers they thrust at me couldn't even pierce my skin. I let out a cold chuckle and told him I came fully prepared. There is no way your cheap iron weapons are getting through my heavy-duty combat suit. It didn't take long for me to beat the absolute crap out of all of them. But even then, they stubbornly kept their mouths shut. They only gave me one warning. Everything I was doing was completely pointless, because their master was on his way. Shortly after, inside an abandoned wooden shack, I found a little boy. I had seen his picture before, so I knew this had to be Isla's little brother, Alan. But right at that moment, a bat appeared at the window. Just as I grabbed Alan and turned to leave, a chilling voice called out from behind, demanding to know why I was trespassing in his dining room and trying to steal his meal. He figured I had to be an agent from the Defiant Oath faction. If not, I was probably Alan's brother. Otherwise, there was no way I'd have the guts to stand against a vampire. I just sneered and told him I wasn't part of this so-called Defiant Oath. I'm just an outsider whose money your pathetic gang tried to extort. The second those words left my mouth, the vampire lunged right at me with his claws bared. I shoved Alan behind me and yelled, "Get out of here. No matter what happens, do not look back." Then, I whipped out my silver sword in a blinding arc, twisting sideways to parry his strike. Instantly, the vampire raised his other claw, slashing viciously straight for my throat. Slash. The impact sent me stumbling backward. But hey, with my hyper regeneration skill, I really didn't need to sweat a few injuries. But against a creature like a vampire, it just wasn't enough. To him, my attacks were basically a joke, like throwing eggs at a brick wall. The vampire lifted me off the ground by my neck, his fangs slowly bearing down toward my throat. I was completely out of options, so I spat out a small stone I'd been hiding in my mouth. I bit down on it hard. Instantly, a look of pure panic flashed across the vampire's face. What I had in my mouth was a spark magic item, something specifically designed to wipe out vampires. Looking at what was about to happen, yeah, I was absolutely planning to take him down with me. I didn't even give him a second to react. I activated my fortitude skill and locked him in a death grip. Well, since you figured it out, why don't we just die together? With a massive, deafening explosion, the surrounding houses were instantly swallowed by a raging sea of fire. Amazingly, my body only suffered some partial burns. I couldn't believe I actually survived a blast like that. My best guess? That fortitude skill must have kicked in and shielded my body from the worst of it. It took me 2.5 days to finally track down Ella. The second she laid eyes on me, she threw her arms around me, completely overwhelmed with emotion. She hadn't seen me for days. She honestly thought I had burned to ash in that inferno. And well, she wasn't exactly wrong. Because by the time I actually made it back to the inn, Heinz was already dead. Right now, I'm actually operating my third clone, Ah-kun. Sure, it's a completely brand new body. But I generated it to look exactly like Heinz, a perfect one-to-one copy. So, close enough, right? I'm practically still Heinz. Anyway, after finally wrapping up the Save the Tragic Girl quest, I headed back to the inn to get some well-deserved rest. Honestly, after that intense fight with the vampire, I could feel that my body had actually gotten a lot stronger. But suddenly, right in that moment, a shadow lunged from behind and grabbed me by the throat. He hissed that he'd finally caught me. The bastard who completely destroyed the vampire family's food supply. In a split second, all the strength drained right out of my body. I have no idea what trick this vampire was pulling, but he completely blocked me from using any of my skills. Without giving me a single second to fight back, he sank his fangs right into my neck. He licked the blood off his lips, muttering that children's blood really does taste better, but I was way too out of it to care about his creepy critique. Because I could feel something twisting inside me, my body was undergoing a terrifying change. The very next second, a system window popped up in my vision. Ah-kun's race has officially changed to vampire. Acquired special trait, lesser vampire. Skill, super recovery has been upgraded to regeneration. Standing over me, the vampire boss, Varak, unleashed a wave of absolutely suffocating pressure. See, because my race had been forcefully turned into a vampire. My body was now wired to involuntarily, completely submit to any higher-ranking vampire. Varak glared down at me, demanding to know if I was the one who rescued Ellen. I put on a terrified act, stuttering that I had no idea what he was talking about. That I was just a random traveler passing through from out of town. Luckily for me, my tranquil mind skill completely filters out any mental mind control. So, despite what my new vampire instincts were screaming, I was actually able to resist my body's urges and lie right to his face. Hearing my pathetic act, Varak completely bought my story without a second thought. He was just way too arrogant, absolutely confident in his absolute control over a lowly lesser vampire. He barked in order for me to follow him on a mission. I figured, hey, playing along and tagging behind him would actually be the perfect way to gather some solid intel. Soon enough, we arrived at an eerie, ancient castle hidden deep within the woods. This turned out to be the vampire family's secret branch headquarters in Azantu. And Varak? He was the head commander running the entire place. Right now, every single vampire was gathered in the main hall. It looked like they were throwing some twisted kind of banquet. Right then, a female vampire suddenly wrapped her arms around my elbow from behind. Her name was Helen, and just like me, she had been bitten, mutating into a lesser vampire. We weren't traditional, pure-blooded aristocrats. So the instant she laid eyes on me, she was overly friendly and clingy. At first, I honestly didn't really get what a lesser vampire was. But as it turns out, the reality of our condition is, they're a type of non-pureblood vampire, usually the offspring of a vampire and a human who fell in love. Or they're mutants like me, turned after being bitten by a pureblood. If you compare it to human society, half-bloods are basically the ninth class. Purebloods like Verlac make up the nobility, and Lady Corlin, as a vampire matriarch, is straight-up royalty. The blood flowing through her veins is the purest, most ancient true blood. Though, of course, holy blood ranks even higher than that. But that stuff only exists in ancient myths. Suddenly, all the chatter around us came to a dead stop. Verlac was about to announce something major. He'd just received some new intel. Those bastards from the Defiant Oath had vanished with a fragment of the Undead King. After looking into it, they found out that the last place the fragment appeared was right at their destroyed granary. You know, the warehouse where they keep their fresh blood locked up. So from now on, every single vampire has to heavily patrol their assigned sectors. If we spot anything weird, we report straight to him. Hearing all this, something suddenly clicked in my head. That village Thomas used to forge the Undead King's fragment was right near Azantu, so they're more than likely the very people Verlac was talking about. Members of the Defiant Oath. The next day, I tagged along with Helen to patrol our assigned sector. Since we're both half-bloods, I just so happened to be put in charge of the exact same district as her. But man, patrolling during the daytime is pure torture. For a vampire. On our way there, Helen and I started chatting. Turns out, the vampires have been forging their own fragments of the Undead King from the inside. Once they're done forging it, they plan to fuse it with the one the Defiant Oath has. No wonder they're making such massive, aggressive moves right now. But, of course, bottom feeders like us don't have the clearance to know where the fragment is actually hidden. Later that night, I sat down for dinner with Ella and her brother. I kept myself completely covered up the entire time. Otherwise, I was terrified that looking like a mutated vampire would scare the living daylights out of them. I mean, sure, I can suppress the bloodthirsty instincts, but I can't exactly hide the physical changes. While we were talking, Ella mentioned she might actually know where the fragment is hidden. About a year ago, she used to clean up the graveyards. Every Friday, members of the Belial faction would go into this one stone chamber there, and the second those heavy stone doors opened, this horrific, pure evil stench would pour out. Fast forward to the dead of night. Inside the stone chamber, Verlac's assistant was right in the middle of preparing a sacrifice. His name was Tilfer. He was a pureblood, too. Out of nowhere, a horde of skeletons came crashing into the chamber. Seeing this, Tilfer barked orders at his vampires to charge in and hold them back. He was absolutely pale with rage. Only the freaks from the Defiant Oath would forge skeletons like this. Just as I thought the Defiant Oath had already broken the treaty. That's when I disguised myself as Hans and slowly walked right up to him. I don't give a damn about your little oath, but I am taking that Undead King's fragment right behind you. Hearing this, Tilfer glared at me, and actually pierced his own shoulder. The faint scent of blood oozing out instantly triggered his feral bloodlust. Seeing him snap, I didn't even flinch. I just calmly pieced the skeletons he shattered back together. Before he knew it, a bunch of skeletons crept up from behind and pinned Tilfer's body down completely. Right at that moment, I brought in my other clone, Ah-kun, to play the hero. With one huge swing, I smashed the skeletons off his back. I told him, Lord Verlac sensed something was wrong. The skeletons outside are pretty much dealt with, so I rushed in here to see if you needed backup. Hearing that, Tilfer unleashed his aura on me, the crushing pressure of a high-ranking vampire. After a thorough check, he realized I wasn't lying and finally let his guard down completely. He then motioned for me to stand behind him and lend him a hand. And in the very next second I obediently gave him exactly what he asked for. Tilfer's face was full of sheer disbelief. He couldn't fathom how a mere half-blood like me would ever dare to launch an attack on a pureblood vampire. His brain just couldn't process it, especially since I was the half-blood personally brought in by Lord Verlac. Just then, 2 streams of dark magic energy tightly coiled around his wrists. That was when it finally dawned on him. He realized that I must be the mole, working from the inside with the skeletons. It didn't take long for me to drain every last drop of blood from Tilfer's body. The system notified me that by consuming pureblood vampire blood I had unlocked the skill, blood magic. I then turned toward the barrier in front of me and tested out my new blood magic. Since it was originally Tilfer's skill, the barrier shouldn't reject it. Sure enough, the barrier shattered in an instant, and resting right there inside was the second fragment of the Undead King. I then channeled the mental energy of all 3 of my clones and concentrated it entirely onto Hans. Meanwhile, just outside the stone chamber, Verlac, who had rushed over in a panic, stared at the scene before him in absolute disbelief. He could no longer sense the aura of the Undead King's fragment. Just like with the Defiant Oath from before, it had vanished into thin air. Soon enough, out of the dead of night, a massive, dark silhouette slowly emerged. Its outline grew sharper in the pitch-black darkness, radiating a mysterious and suffocating pressure. Seeing this, Verlac frantically ordered his vampire subordinates to focus all their firepower on the dark figure. But as their attacks slammed into me, they felt like nothing more than a light tickle. Having fully absorbed the second fragment of the Undead King, Hans underwent another individual evolution, becoming a nether mage. The Undead King fragment collection progress had reached 2 out of 10. My internal dark magic power grew explosively. I gained the special skills, immortality, and absolute omniscience. Immortality meant that as long as my core wasn't utterly obliterated, I could continuously resurrect and regenerate. And absolute omniscience granted me unconditional mastery over all dark magic, downloading every piece of knowledge and secret in this world right into my mind. I gripped my scepter and unleashed death's dark magic. In a flash, Verlac and his men were swallowed up by a thick, suffocating smoke. And from deep within that heavy fog, shadowy hands would violently lash out, snatching away any unlucky vampire they could grab. The horrifying sight sent a shiver of pure panic down Verlac's spine. Even he was completely helpless against those dark hands. Once all the other vampires had been wiped out, I slowly stepped out of the shadows and approached Verlac. Looks like your bloodline really is the purest among them. To think you actually survived the dark magic for this long. But now just be a good boy and become my personal blood bag. Moments later, I took control of Ah-kun and completely devoured Verlac. The very next second, the system notified me that my individual growth conditions had been met. My special skill, Bloodkin Half-Blood, had evolved into Bloodkin Pureblood. It was exactly as I had guessed. It could trigger individual evolutions by devouring other species, just like what happened with Hans. As long as I collect all 10 fragments, I should be able to evolve into the legendary Undead King. Plus, feeding on my own kind would drastically speed up my growth. Meanwhile, on the other side of things, with Verlac dead, the surviving half-blood vampires were forced to flee Azantu. Their only option now was to retreat to their base and beg headquarters for reinforcements. As for our side, Hans would stay behind in Azantu to wipe out the remnants of the Belial organization. And I would take control of Ah-kun and travel with Ella and her brother, heading straight for Lapella City in the eastern continent. Her uncle ran a shop over there. Besides, the siblings had absolutely no one left. No other family left in Azantu. And honestly, I couldn't be around to protect them 24/7. After spending so much time together, parting ways so suddenly naturally leaves me feeling a bit empty. Come to think of it, I haven't felt this way in years, not since my parents passed away. My personality has changed a lot since I awakened my powers. 2.5 days later, I finally returned to the village. The dimensional space Hans gained after his evolution, it's the perfect place to lock up these vampires. And if it works, I might even be able to open this space back on Earth. Right now, Verlac looked completely furious. He had never been treated with such disrespect before. At the time, I only fed his own blood back to him, I didn't actually kill him. Because I figured keeping these bloodsuckers alive would definitely come in handy later. Verlac also figured out that the fragments of the Undead King, forged by those guys from the Oath of Defiance, must be on me, because he could sense more than one incredibly strong power radiating from me. So, I just played along and admitted to the identity. You're absolutely right, I am indeed Hans, from the Oath of Defiance. At that, Verlac raised his hand and cast a blood barrier. He formed it using the very last drops of true blood left in his body. I tested it out a little, and realized it would be pretty tough to break through quickly. Plus, just dragging them all the way here had already drained a lot of Hans's energy. So, I cancelled the summon and returned to the real world. But the moment I left, a silver arrow suddenly shot straight toward one of the vampires at breakneck speed. Verlac instantly recognized where it came from. It was a special silver arrow crafted by paladins just to hunt vampires. Right then, a massive extermination squad of holy knights, clad in silver armor, came charging at them with earth-shattering momentum. Meanwhile, back in reality, I still couldn't quite wrap my head around it. Everything that had happened lately. First, I saved that poor, helpless girl, Ella. Then, I single-handedly wiped out an evil vampire coven, saving Azantu from a tragic fate. Playing the hero and saving the world like this, that was something I never even dared to dream about. Thinking about all this, I pulled up the system interface. After doing so much, I figured I must have racked up a decent amount of shop points. But to my absolute shock, I was actually sitting on over 700,000 karma points. I figured it had to be because of the dark mages and the vampires, since they're part of the monstrous races. Any quests related to them are insanely difficult. So, it made perfect sense that the rewards were this massive. I decided to keep upgrading my skills. A moment later, the system notified me that my clone summon limit had gone up. Plus, I got a brand new skill called Persona. It allows the main body to offload emotions into a clone vessel. Immediately, an idea flashed through my mind. I think I finally understand why I got this specific skill. For a long time now, every time I acquired a unique skill, it was always exactly what I needed most at that moment. Recently, I've grown close to people I barely knew, and helped others defeat incredibly powerful enemies. And every time I did, these entirely new, unfamiliar emotions would well up inside me. But for years I had completely locked my heart away in a dark corner. So, while my body grew stronger, my mind and soul just hadn't kept up. All that loneliness, the grief, all those negative emotions I had been bottling up, were slowly eating away at my sanity. That's why this persona skill is the perfect way to help me overcome this mental block. It's just that offloading the emotions doesn't feel like they vanish instantly. It feels more like gently packing them away into a drawer. After transferring all those feelings, I was actually a bit worried that Hans wouldn't be able to handle the crushing weight of so much negativity. But hearing this, Hans just smiled and comforted me. Pain and despair, he said, have always been the inevitable companions of life. For his undead race, it's not a big problem at all. The moment those words fell, my whole body froze in place. Those were the exact words I had once said to Hans. I never expected to hear them coming out of his mouth with such a completely different tone. It seems that after these clones took away my emotions, they become more like people with their own independent consciousness. Just then, I heard a sudden explosion outside. At that moment, that familiar feeling of hesitation crept back into my heart. It must be those thugs causing trouble in the city again, but I still found it so hard to overcome my own cowardice. Then, Hans slowly walked right up to me. In a very firm tone, he said one thing: wiping out the forces of evil doesn't need any reason at all. So, there was absolutely no need for me to hesitate like this. That's when I finally realized something. Actually, more than anyone else, I wanted to stop these things from happening. It was just my natural instinct to always choose to run away. But now, I'm no longer that useless loser with crippled legs. From this moment on, I have absolutely no excuse to ignore this chaos anymore. After that, I controlled Hans and headed straight to the scene of the incident. After observing the area for a moment, I cast the necromantic dark magic, the Eye of Insight. Using my mastery over all dark magic, I set out to track down the thug's hideout. Right at that moment, not far away, a bunch of scumbags were casually bullying ordinary people. And I happened to see this exact scene through the Eye of Insight. On top of that, there were many other similar riots, all within my line of sight. It took me almost an entire night to wipe out all the thugs in the vicinity. But I'm not worried about them coming out to cause trouble again, because I left an indelible mark of fear right on their souls. As soon as they even think about doing something illegal, they'll suffer an agonizing, mind-splitting pain. However, the Eye of Insight has a very obvious limitation. If exposed to light, its power will gradually weaken and disappear. So, it would be really hard to keep hunting down thugs during the daytime. That's when I had an idea. There are so many pigeons foraging around the city right now. If I could just control them, this problem would be perfectly solved. This is exactly why so many people are obsessed with dark magic. One of the main reasons is that you can bend all kinds of creatures to your will. But, I chanted the incantation for a really long time, and still couldn't control a single pigeon. I guess that familiar type magic abilities must depend heavily on the target creature's race. The pigeon race is clearly much harder to manipulate than undead skeletons. After that, I teleported to a cave in the other world. After all, casting dark magic back on the blue planet was just way too risky. 2.5 hours later, I finally succeeded in enslaving a single pigeon. Right after that, I infused the magic with a contagious effect. This way, all the pigeons would spread it and obey my commands. Let's just call them the children of the devil for now. Meanwhile, on the other side, the Holy Knight subjugation squad completely wiped out the vampire's stronghold in Azantu. And they even squeezed some intel out of Varric's mouth. The vampires were merely cooperating with the descendants of the Undead King. This left Archbishop Latius with a look of deep distress, because he managed to deduce a few things from the battle traces left in the stone chamber. The vampire clan was indeed hoping to refine the fragments of the Undead King. But now, that fragment must have been snatched away by someone else. And through his retrospective magic, he speculated that the culprit was none other than Hans, from the Heaven-Defying Oath organization. Just then, Saintess Leosta delivered a crucial piece of news to Latius. She had picked up the Undead King's aura once again. The approximate location was a cave in the mountains, out to the northwest. At this very moment, I was sitting cross-legged at the entrance of that cave, waiting for the intel gathered by the children of the devil. But a moment later, I noticed something completely wrong. The movement patterns of the children of the devil were acting very strange. It looked exactly like they were being hunted down. Not long after, an entire order of knights appeared right here, at the cave entrance. They're all wearing the exact same crosses. They must be paladins from the Holy Order. So they're definitely here to capture Hans. After all, the Order has never exactly gotten along with black magic. At that moment, Commander Locke, who was leading them, slowly walked up. He told me it would be best if I just surrendered quietly. I pretended to go along with his words, and then, the second his guard was down, I suddenly thrust a massive hand forward. But right then it was like my black magic had completely lost its effect. Loki's sword effortlessly pierced right through my chest. I honestly couldn't wrap my head around it. Sure, I obtained the Undead King's black magic, but I've only ever used it to punish the bad guys. If you look at it that way, aren't I doing the exact same thing as you guys who call yourselves the Holy Church? Hearing this, Loki completely cut me off. He told me that from the very moment I chose to embrace black magic, I was destined to be absolutely no different from those villains. That was when I noticed something was wrong with my body. Right from the very beginning, something was blocking me from casting my black magic. While I was trying to figure it out, the sound of people singing gradually drifted over. I was absolutely certain that this singing was weakening my magical abilities, even though I still had enough power to kill the one singing. Doing that would really make me no different from those thugs. And it was exactly at that moment Loki gripped his long sword and ruthlessly drove it into my body. Immediately after, their singing slowly started to form into a glowing chain of light. But I just chuckled as I looked right at them. I forgot to tell you guys one little thing. Once upon a time, Valak was also this confident that he could trap me. Saying that, I triggered my summon canceling ability once again, and teleported straight back to Blue Star. Now things were really starting to get troublesome. Come to think of it, over in that alternate world, I've already made enemies with quite a few factions. First, it was the Heaven-Defying Oath. Then later came the Vampire Clan and now the Holy Order, one of the absolute biggest powers on the continent. Plus, because of my very existence, all sorts of conflicts have broken out across the continent. Well, no wonder my karma points have been shooting up so fast. Meanwhile, the demon seeds had already started taking action. Because of their highly contagious nature, whenever they encountered other individuals, they would rapidly spread the black magic. So right now, my eyes and ears are basically spread all over the entire city. And very quickly, I got my very first piece of intel. By the time I rushed over there, that scumbag was busy torturing a young girl. Seeing this, I immediately charged forward and put a complete stop to it. Your life ends right here and now. Take a good, hard look back at your sinful life. When it comes to the sheer level of evil, absolutely no other magic could ever compare to black magic. It forces a person to look back at their entire life while they die in absolute agony. It's almost as if they're being killed by their very own selves. And since Hans had already gone through his second evolution, the death skeletons that are being forged right now have also evolved into mid-level ghosts. 2.5 minutes later, Section Chief Park from the Ability Management Bureau arrived at the scene with his team. But right after they finished investigating the area, they realized the victim looked an awful lot like a villain they had been tracking for a very long time. And judging from the traces left nearby, it looked exactly like the handiwork of a guardian. Because they had detected massive traces of black magic being used. But more than anything, right now they really wanted to meet this guardian face to face. After all, it was their very first time seeing a guardian. Who would write out these words while doing their job? At the exact same time, the Guardian Association received a formal request from the Ability Management Bureau to assist in the investigation. They realized that this case was extremely similar to the incident from a while ago where that trio was arrested. So, they were actually planning to have me officially join the association as a guardian. Meanwhile, on the other side of things, I projected my main consciousness right into Ah-kun's body. By now, Ah-kun had already escorted Ella and her brother safely to La Paris City. When it was time to say goodbye, Ella wrapped her arms tightly around me. She was so grateful that I'd stay by her side through all of this. If it weren't for me, she probably would have died back in Azantu. But she was still a little worried about me, mostly because she'd noticed a huge shift in my personality. That caught me off guard for a second. Could it be the mosque's influence? Before this, I had funneled all my negative emotions and my desperate craving for recognition straight into Hans. That's exactly why Hans started pulling flashy stunts just to get attention, like playing dress-up as a guardian. Just to punish some local thugs. As for Ah-kun, I burdened him with nothing but silence and lies. I just didn't expect Ella to catch on to the changes so fast. After saying my goodbyes to her and the girls, I made my way to the kingdom's capital, Taralia. Besides being the royal city, it was also the main headquarters for the Church of the Supreme God. Once I got there, I found a secluded spot, and summoned my fourth clone, Abu. His unique trait was martial bone, which essentially compensated him with bonus techniques and experience just from physical training. Since my previous clones were all stuck operating in the shadows, I really needed a clean, public identity if I was going to survive here in Taralia. And this time, my clone was going to be a knight of light, respected by absolutely everyone. So, I marched right into the Holy Hall, declaring that I wanted to devote everything to the Supreme God, hoping to inherit his will as a paladin. Hearing that, the registrar looked completely against it. He said that even though I donated a massive sum of gold, letting some guy with a sketchy background become a paladin was practically blasphemy. But the Knight Commander thought he was overreacting. He pointed out that the divine records clearly state that anyone truly evil would inevitably show their true colors during paladin training. I just chuckled and told them, well then, you can rest easy and keep a close eye out for my true colors. Man, I really didn't expect paladin training to be such pure hell, though. Not only did we have to grind through more than 12 hours of physical training a day, but we also had to chant those damn prayers while doing it. At first, I thought it was completely pointless. It wasn't until a month later that I realized pushing yourself to the absolute limit and repeating prayers to solidify your faith was the only way to actually strengthen your holy power. Still, I couldn't help but wonder if the torture had made everyone here lose their minds. They were always staring at my body with these really weird looks. In the blink of an eye, 3 months flew by. Thanks to my super regeneration and the martial bone trait, I completely dominated the training camp, easily taking the title of top rookie. And now, I was finally cleared to join the paladin's baptism ceremony. Oddly enough, they pushed the schedule up earlier than usual this year. I had a pretty good guess as to why, though. The church was probably scrambling to track down the descendant of the Undead King. So they desperately needed to boost their combat forces right now. As for the baptism ceremony itself, it was basically an exchange. The initiate sacrifices all of their mana to the Supreme God, meaning their body can never wield magic ever again. In return, the god grants them a blessing, allowing them to channel massive amounts of holy power instead. The strength of that blessing varies from person to person, and the single biggest factor in deciding that strength is your level of faith in the Supreme God. When you're standing before the divine, the purer your trust is, without a single trace of deceit, the more likely you are to become a wildly powerful paladin. I didn't have to worry about that at all, though. In fact, that was one of the main reasons I was so eager to become a paladin in the first place. Because I'd already used the mask to funnel every last drop of absolute trust straight into Abu. And to make sure the Supreme God felt the purest, most undiluted faith imaginable, I took the mental energy from all of my clones and concentrated it entirely into Abu. So, the moment my baptism began, a warm, overwhelmingly powerful golden light slowly began rising up from the soles of my feet. Everyone in the room was completely mesmerized by the glow. It was the very first time they'd ever witnessed such a glorious display of divine power. The light surged so high, it even reached the head of the Supreme God's statue. The bishop pulled me aside and told me something crazy. He said that a holy power of my magnitude was estimated to be on the level of a high priest. Right after that, a system notification popped up. Skill acquired, Holy Baptism. I can effectively share my spiritual power across every single clone. And I've discovered that the god enshrined in the main temple, rather than being a deity with actual personality traits, feels much more like a system. When I opened up my spiritual senses to connect with this god, if I had to describe it using human emotions, the sensation I picked up on couldn't really be called trust. It was probably closer to curiosity. And the god also told me one more thing. Divine power can only be used for good deeds. Just like that, the next day rolled around. The command center was an absolute mess right now. While they were tracking the Undead Queen, they kept getting ambushed by vampire factions. And since the subjugation squad completely failed to meet their targets, the political pressure back in the kingdom was only going to get worse. It got so bad that they were forced to order a full retreat. Commander Rocky dragged himself down to the training grounds, looking incredibly frustrated. Right now, he could only pin his hopes on the new recruits. Just then, he noticed a particular rookie on the field, whose performance was absolutely outstanding. He marched straight up to me. He told me that my divine power was already at an instructor's level. But, compared to a true holy knight, there was still a massive gap. Unless I was willing to follow him to the great temple of Roselia. I didn't overthink it and immediately accepted his offer, even though I'd literally never heard of this great temple of Roselia. Judging from his tone, it was definitely a huge compliment. I figured I'd just follow his lead. On the way there, Commander Rocky explained the history of the great temple. It's the sacred headquarters of the main god's order, located right in the heart of the continent. It's also where the Pope and the Holy Maiden reside. I didn't expect to be brought straight to the Holy Maiden's own temple. My old instructor did say that this place was the absolute best spot to level up fast. Meanwhile, back in the real world, because of that incident where Hans took down those thugs, he went totally viral online. But during all this, I noticed something really strange. Those thugs kept bringing up a syndicate called the Brahma Guild, and it sounded like this syndicate was a mastermind pulling all these scumbags together. So, I took on my Ah-kun persona and tracked down this sketchy underground spot. Inside, there was just some guy sitting quietly. I slowly slid a bag over to him. "I'm here to sell some stuff," I said. The guy just scoffed, not even bothering to look up. "You're in the wrong place, pal," he muttered. "This isn't your average pawn shop." I completely ignored him. Instead, I just flipped the bag over and dumped everything out. Clang! Dozens of gold coins came crashing down onto the table like heavy rain. The guy's expression instantly changed. Wait, if I remember correctly, these are the member badges from that human trafficking ring. The rumors online said they were all wiped out by some absolute psycho in a mask. He suddenly paused, eyeing me up and down very carefully. After mentally weighing his options, he finally pointed me toward the back door, telling me to head downstairs. "But whatever you do not wander off anywhere else," he warned. I followed his instructions and found the door. Down there, another masked figure was sitting at a desk. I went straight to the point and asked if I could exchange this for something other than hard cash. I told him, if possible, I want a winning jackpot lottery ticket. Because honestly, what's the point of having piles of cash if you can't even spend it? It's basically just scrap paper. Right now, I needed to operate under my real identity, Han Seong-hyeon, not as Hans or Ah-kun. So I could actually spend this money legally. If I claimed the cash through a winning lottery ticket, it would completely wipe the trail and save me from any future headaches. 2.5 minutes later, the masked man nodded. "Of course we can do that. We have a winning ticket worth about 6.1 billion won. It's valid to be cashed out anytime within the next 4 months." Hearing that, I was absolutely thrilled. "Awesome. Do me a favor and prep 2 more of those tickets for me." The masked guy just sighed and held up his hands helplessly. "Buddy, the stuff in your bag is only worth 6.1 billion won tops." I just smirked and waved off his concern. "Oh, don't you worry about that. I've got plenty more where that came from, and it's way more valuable." As I spoke, almost like magic, 3 heavy gold bars appeared out of thin air, landing solidly on the table right in front of him. The masked man just barely glanced at the gold bars. Instead, he stared at the bracelet on my wrist in absolute shock. He quickly apologized for what he said earlier. Apparently, my bracelet was clearly a dimensional storage item, something only the Guardians were supposed to have. A flash of irritation crossed my eyes. "I'm a little short on time, so let's wrap this deal up, quickly." The masked man finally snapped out of his daze. No wonder when I first walked in, he caught a faint whiff of blood. And judging by the stuff in the bag, he figured out I was probably that mysterious vigilante on the internet, the one hunting down scumbags. I stepped forward and gripped his arm tightly. "It was a pleasure doing business with you today. I'll be sure to come by more often." The masked man instantly caught my drift. It was a clear warning to keep his mouth shut about me being here. A little while later, I walked out of the pawn shop holding my payout check. Suddenly having this much money, I actually had no idea what the hell I should even buy. But thinking it over, what I really need right now are some loyal minions I can boss around. Besides, the streets were bustling with people right now. Just a few months ago, this place was so dangerous that most folks wouldn't even dare to step outside for some fresh air. Now that I think about it, this whole peaceful vibe, I was the one who made it happen. I don't know why, but deep down, I actually felt a warm sense of pride. But just then, a complete stranger's voice suddenly whispered right in my ear. My heart instantly skipped a beat. Who the hell is this guy? He snuck up right behind me without making a single sound. Without a second thought, I quickly jumped to my feet, sniffing me from behind like a creep. "What the hell do you want, man?" But his next words made me freeze dead in my tracks. "If I'm not mistaken, you're a vampire too, right?" Turns out, he was a level 6 vampire from the Dodemia dimension. I was totally caught off guard. This guy was actually a vampire from another dimension? You see, whenever someone awakens their powers, the dimensional realm they get teleported to is completely random. And so far, there are literally tens of thousands of different dimensions out there. But right now, my top priority was finding a quick excuse to get the hell out of here. If my identity gets exposed in public, I am totally screwed. But then, the very next second, I completely naturally blurted out my real identity. I was freaking out on the inside. Why did I just answer him so effortlessly? Wait, is he using some kind of mind control on me? He just gave me this totally unsurprised look. He introduced himself as Ganmo from an organization called the Blood Alliance. It's an underground network made up of vampires living right here on Earth. Ever since he came back, his job has been recruiting other vampires into the fold. As he spoke, he slowly handed me an introductory business card for the Alliance. I was pretty skeptical. I had no idea an organization like this even existed on Earth. "But what did you mean by level earlier?" Ganmo didn't answer me directly. Instead, he told me that if I was interested, I should just follow him. At the same time, I noticed a few people lingering behind us, glancing our way every now and then. Judging by their body language, they looked like lookouts reporting back to someone. It didn't take long before I followed Ganmo down into a hidden basement. Since vampires are terrified of sunlight, the Blood Alliance chose to set up their headquarters entirely underground. Once inside, Ganmo finally explained what the hell a level actually was. A level, just as it sounds, measures your rank. Every single vampire possesses a vampiric gene which dictates their overall power level. The Blood Alliance has a way to test this gene and give it a numerical value. And that final number. Following his lead, we quickly arrived at a hidden room supposedly to measure a vampire's power level. Ganmo explained that the magic circle in front of us was designed to test our vampiric traits. He told me not to just stand there like a statue. Since you're here, step up and give it a try, he said. The moment I stepped onto the magic circle, I paused. Wait, why is there a skull here? On top of that, I could clearly sense the lingering traces of dark magic. And it wasn't just dark magic, the air was thick with sorcery, curses, and even alchemy. It was a chaotic blend of different magical energies. This entire place completely defied everything I knew. It's been over 20 years since the first generation of Awakened returned to Earth. Yet even now, magical artifacts and tools are incredibly rare to find. The reason for this shortage comes down to the fundamental laws of awakened energy. The rules simply don't carry over between different dimensions. Take mana and dark magic, for example. They are two fundamentally different forces. But somehow it seems the Blood Alliance has figured out a way to fuse all these different types of magic together. Right then, 5 shimmering blood orbs materialized above the circle. This meant my vampiric traits were at level 5, and the connection between the orbs was incredibly stable, which meant my regenerative abilities would be quite strong, judging by the standard laws of vampires. My blood purity was somewhere around level 6. But right at that moment, Ganmo's expression suddenly turned downright hostile. When he first heard I was from a different dimension, he actually looked a bit excited, but he clearly wasn't expecting my vampiric traits to only be at a measly level 5. With a scoff, he gave a subtle nod. The next second, several vampires lunged forward, reaching out to grab me. Well, I definitely didn't see that coming, so they had ulterior motives all along. No wonder they used such a ridiculously complex magic circle, just to test my level. Suddenly, right in the middle of the chaos, the heavy doors of the hidden room were thrown wide open. The intruder shouted for Ganmo to stop what he was doing immediately. They declared he was under immediate arrest for the kidnapping and attempted murder of his own kind. Ganmo scowled, visibly annoyed. Lee Min-ju, barging into someone else's home uninvited, don't you think that's a bit rude? I stared at Lee Min-ju. There was something familiar about her, like I'd definitely seen her somewhere before. Ganmo glared at her, demanding answers with a furious look. He told her to wake up and get her head straight. Stop blindly following the Blood Alliance's pathetic rules. He spat out. The Alliance is nothing but a bunch of spineless lapdogs for the humans. Our kind is vastly superior and infinitely more powerful than humans, yet here we are, groveling at their feet, forced to hide in the shadows like rats. Lee Min-ju's expression darkened, and she shot back without hesitation. It's exactly because of the reckless, violent actions of extremists like you that we're forced into hiding in the first place. Ganmo just let out a dark, mocking chuckle. Do you really think that all of our kind share your pathetic mindset? The moment he finished speaking, Ji-hoon, a colleague standing right behind Min-ju, suddenly made his move. He swung a brutal punch, burying his fist deep into Min-ju's stomach. He had betrayed them to join Ganmo a long time ago. Back in his own dimension, Ji-hoon had been a powerful lord complete with a grand castle and absolute authority. After returning to Earth, everything was stripped away. His home was reduced to a cramped, filthy basement. And just to scrape by and survive, he had to work the night shift as a lowly security guard. Min-ju clutched her stomach, looking up at him in pure disbelief. Even so, why kidnap our own people? She gasped. Are you actually planning an open rebellion against the Alliance? Ganmo grinned wickedly at her words. Not quite. He was actually here specifically to round up low-level vampires. See, in the real world, he couldn't earn any more karma points. So, if he wanted to keep getting stronger, there was only one twisted option left. Cannibalism. But this wasn't your typical earthly cannibalism. He needed to devour vampires who hailed from entirely different dimensions. Because when different vampire factors combine, they become incredibly powerful. But if they just blindly feed on their own kind, it causes some serious mental corruption. And if they can't overcome that corruption, they mutate into a blood-crazed vampire. Once, a completely mindless blood-crazed vampire appeared right here on Earth. To take that monster down, humanity paid an agonizingly heavy price. Ever since then, the word vampire has been synonymous with danger. But now, after countless experiments, they've finally figured out how to extract the malicious intent from the blood. Hearing this, it suddenly clicked for me. I'm guessing this magic circle isn't just some simple tool for detecting vampire factors. It's probably designed to turn vampires into drugs with absolutely zero side effects. Right after, I saw Ganmo hand Ji-hoon a pill. With a loud gulp, he swallowed it down. Instantly, Ji-hoon's body began bulging at a visible rate. He genuinely never expected that feeding on his own kind would bring such a massive leap in growth. Right now, he felt like his entire body was overflowing with endless power. Without missing a beat, he grabbed Lee Min-ju by the throat. This isn't nearly enough. Why don't you go ahead and refine her into a pill too? Ganmo scoffed. Let's keep Lee Min-ju alive for now. We still have a pureblood vampire waiting for us right over there. However, the moment his eyes locked onto mine, a wild, arrogant smirk crept onto my face. You guys say the most interesting things. Now I'm actually getting pretty excited. Just how powerful am I going to get once I eat the both of you? As I spoke, a massive gate forged entirely out of skulls materialized right in front of me. Hans's figure slowly stepped out from within, closely followed by dozens of chilling, terrifying undead skeletons. The sight made Ganmo and his crew's hearts skip a beat. What the hell are these things? Ji-hoon didn't say a word, just kept pumping up his own bulging muscles. With a loud slam, he swung his fists and smashed heavily into the two skeletons in front of him. Ji-hoon roared, "Die, every last one of you." I observed his movements closely. The way this guy's body had mutated. He hardly even looked like a vampire anymore. Do vampires from different dimensions all look completely different? While pondering, I casually tossed out a dark magic spell, smacking Ji-hoon flying through the air. Then, with a wide sweep of his massive hand, Ah-kun caught him firmly. "Since you're offering yourself up on a silver platter, I won't hold back." With a sharp hiss, I opened my jaws wide and clamped right down on his neck. The sight sent Ganmo into an absolute panic. To think I was actually feeding directly on my own kind. Wasn't I terrified of mutating into a blood-crazed vampire? Feeding directly on your own kind really does hit you with an intense wave of mental corruption. Right now, I could literally hear all the chaotic thoughts screaming inside Ji-hoon's body. But before long, a rushing, feverish sensation washed over me. It seemed the different vampire factors inside me were fusing and evolving. Sure enough, a moment later, a system prompt popped up. It congratulated me on gaining 2 new traits, Insight and Stealth. Insight, it lets me instantly measure an opponent's physical condition and power stats. And Stealth, it completely wipes away all traces of my presence and environmental tracks. At the same time, I unlocked a special skill, Hybrid Evolution. My physical strength exploded with massive growth. Every time I absorb a different vampire factor, I instantly inherit that individual's bloodline abilities. Vampires possess unique supernatural powers depending on their lineage, and with my newly acquired Hybrid Evolution, I can snatch away every single one of their stats. By now, my own arms were already showing the exact same mutations as Ji-hoon's. Ganmo just stood there, his face completely blank with shock. Why was I still conscious after feeding on my own kind? And it looked like I had just gone through a complete physical evolution on top of it. I walked over with a sinister chuckle. "Want me to tell you the secret to preventing mental corruption? It's actually really simple. As long as I tune out those dark whispers when feeding, I'll be fine." Then, I fired up my mind-reading skill and reached out, grabbing Ganmo right by the head. Turns out, the mastermind pulling his strings was none other than the Brahma Syndicate, and his main contact over there goes by the name Beta. Looks like all these complicated spells originated from Brahma. A little while later, I brought Lee Minju back to the apartment building. She had passed out pretty early on, so she was dying to know how we managed to escape. Looking at her totally bewildered expression, I asked her if she'd ever heard of the Haho Mask. You know, that terrifying guy who single-handedly wiped out every single villain syndicate in the city. I told her that when he ambushed Ganmo, I used the chaos to slip away. Minju's eyes absolutely lit up with excitement. She couldn't thank me enough for saving her life. She told me she's a vampire from the Luthenia dimension. But her face and her voice, I swear I've seen her somewhere before. Minju stared at me, unblinking. "My savior, what faction do you belong to?" I told her to drop the savior title. "My name is Han Sung-yun. Just call me Sun-yun from now on. Plus, I just got back to Earth, so I'm not actually affiliated with anyone yet." Minju practically jumped with excitement. She insisted that I should join the Blood Alliance. "Most vampires are part of the Alliance," she explained. "They're mostly moderates over there. And the Blood Center provides a steady supply of fresh meals." I thought about it for a second and took her up on the offer. It was about time I found a job for Ah-kun, anyway. The moment we stepped into the Alliance base, a little girl threw herself right into Minju's arms. She clearly had the traits of a vampire too, but as far as I knew, Earth didn't have any returnees this young. Minju picked up on my confusion right away. She told me the little girl's name was Nahi. She was born and raised right here on Earth. Her father was the actual returnee. To save Nahi from a terminal illness, he had no choice but to turn her into a vampire. Hearing that, it finally clicked for me. Why the government keeps such a tight leash on vampires? After all, the infection spreads insanely fast. One slip up, and it wouldn't take long before more than half of the human race was turned. Minju reassured me that I shouldn't worry too much, though, because spreading the infection on Earth actually takes several times more power. And to make sure Nahi could still live a happy life out in the sun even after being turned, her dad had to go to incredible lengths. After that, Minju showed me to an apartment unit, telling me this would be my new dorm. She said if I needed absolutely anything, I could just come find her. Right then, it finally hit me. The way Minju was moving her hands just now was exactly like a pretty famous streamer I knew of. When I mentioned it, she suddenly turned completely red. She asked if I was one of her fans. Feeling a bit awkward, I quickly explained. "Oh, no, not really. You just popped up on my recommended feed, so I watched a couple of times."